This is Metrosource Minis, the official podcast of Metrosource Magazine and home of short-form interviews with your favorite personalities from the LGBTQ world and beyond. Quick, fun, and informative. It's Metrosource on the go. Out and proud since 1990. Well, hello. This is Metrosource Minis. I'm your host, Alexander Rodriguez. During this quarantine, we all crave a little touch. Well, how about a touch from the past? I am chatting with Jen Curcio, the co-host of a Touch from the Past podcast featured in our Metrosource publication, Podcast to Listen To. And this podcast is one part history and one part spooky. Along with Canez, Jen explores the history and ghost stories inside the variety of buildings and often find that history is scarier than any haunting. Hello, you go, ghost. Jen is a master storyteller, or do we say Mr. Storyteller? I don't know. She is originally from Philadelphia, but lives and loves LA. She's a winner of the Moth and can be seen performing around Los Angeles at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. In pre-pandemic, she co-hosted the Copper Still Comedy Hour. Please welcome Jen Curcio. Hey, girl.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you guys.
No problem. So a lesbian wearing flannel. Who knew? You are spot on.
Thank you. You know, I call it my Halloween flannel. I feel like the colors are a little bit more spooky.
Ooh, spooky. So you are a star storyteller. There's clips on YouTube that everybody can check out, and you've appeared at so many venues, delighting audiences with your many stories. Now, how is storytelling different from stand-up? I mean, besides the obvious, but how was that kind of medium different?
Well, it's funny because I really tried to do stand-up sometimes, but it just doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't translate. I admire anyone who can translate and go between storytelling and stand-up, but I feel like stand-up, it needs to be a little bit more set up, punchline, next thing. And for me, it's like, I'm all about that story. So I don't know. I mean, definitely more jokes, but my stories are still pretty funny. I mean, I think.
Yeah, no, they are very funny. And it's the way you present it that's so entrancing and funny and captivating. Now, what are the main components to good storytelling?
I would say having a good structure. So like the setup, getting everybody to know the characters involved. Even for me, it's always a true story. So it's like you kind of have to paint that person who's in the story, and then get into the meat of it, like get into like what happened, and then the climax, like lots of details, lots of adjectives, lots of pizzazz. And I always like to kind of have like a moral to it. Like I don't go heavy-handed with it, but I like to be like, and a tie in some way, like, and then I learned this, but not obviously I wouldn't be like, and then I learned this.
Yeah. Now, what's one of the favorite stories that you love to tell?
I would say one of my favorite ones, it was like a growing story, because basically this is embarrassing, but I had a huge crush on this woman in I say woman now, but this girl in high school. And I ended up getting into art classes because she was in art classes. And then I was like, I really like art. So then I ended up going to the same art school as her, the all-girls art school. And
stalker.
I know. It's creepy. I'm embarrassed. But I was telling this story on stage. So this is how the story evolved. I was telling the story on stage about a year ago. And this guy in the audience jumps up and goes, "Is that?" And he yells her name.
Oh my God.
And I was like, actually, yeah, like from the stage, I'm like, yeah. And he's like, "That's my cousin. I need to talk to you. She's married to a Trump supporter. I need you to fly to New York and break up that marriage." And I'm like,
rescue her.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, that crush is over. Like, I'm not going to take it to that super creepy level. Like, I was creepy enough.
You're like, I'll follow her and change my whole education, but I won't fly to New York. Okay. Okay, let's talk a Touch from the Past podcast. When did your obsession with ghosts and history and hauntings, where did that come from?
I would say it probably came from when I was a little kid. My cousin got me really into horror films super early on, like as a 4-year-old. I mean, I was obsessed with Freddy Krueger. wanted this Freddy Krueger doll so bad, and my parents were like, leave that in the house. 4-year-olds are not supposed to be walking around with that. But and then it was kind of like, once I got into school, like my favorite topic was history, and then I started to kind of like put the two together. Like history is kind of scary. Like
Yeah,
real
it is.
messed up stuff happen, you know?
There are so many LGBT owned podcasts out there, and I like that this is a little break from the politically and socially aware shows out there, which there's definitely a need for. I'm not saying that, but this is like a fun, juicy, extracurricular delight.
Thank you.
You do add a little gay sensibility to it, though, don't you?
Oh yeah, I'd say. I mean, I can't help it. I'm just so gay.
Now, what's one of the scariest stories that you've talked about on your show?
Ooh, I would say definitely the Batman of Echo Park. Um,
Ooh,
yeah, because we're mostly in LA. I mean, Clark and I live in LA. We met in LA. And so we like to cover places we can actually go to.
yeah.
And the Batman of Echo Park, it was so creepy because it was this kind of like middle-aged straight couple starting in Wisconsin, and they moved to LA, and the woman had a secret like attic lover, and he would come down when her husband was away at work, and so she actually put him in a crate and moved him to Los Angeles with her. And
What?
yeah, no joke. And he was seriously her like secret attic lover who would creep down every day for sex. And it was so funny because he actually got published. Like he would type, this was in 1933, he would type up stories for magazines for publication, and she would run them down to the publishers and get him published.
Oh
So it was
my
like,
God,
wow,
that
he's
is
still
so creepy.
so creepy, right? So she and her husband are having an argument. He heard it, crept down, grabbed a shotgun, and killed the husband. So it was like a super sad story at the end of things. But then this woman was like such a like manizer, I guess you could call her, because she just like got two new boyfriends. One was an attorney, and one was just a rich guy who like continued to fund her lavish lifestyle. And so the attorney represented her in court during the case against the murder of her husband. And she got like, she walked away, like straight up walked away. And then the attic guy literally walked all the way to Canada. Just
That's insane. It's
wild.
like Forrest Gump
Yeah.
meets, I don't know, like a Perry Mason episode. Like, that's insane.
Yeah. It was so wild. I couldn't believe it. And this house is just in Echo Park with the super creepy attic still.
Oh my God. Can you go visit it or no? Is it?
It's still a house. It's like 3 different apartments, so you can't go inside. But
Oh, okay.
Clark like always gets close to knocking on the door. I was like, let's not. It's a pandemic.
All right, and not to change the mood, but this is something that we had wanted to discuss. Part of your storytelling is being authentic and totally open about your life experiences, and you have talked very openly, and you and I have had conversations about your experience with domestic abuse.
Yeah.
First of all, domestic abuse in same-sex households is rarely talked about. And why do you think that is? Because it's happening.
Yeah, it happens so much. I think, well, for me, it was part of the issue was like, I didn't know it even existed. Like, I didn't know it could happen. So when I was going through it, I had a lot of denial because I'm like, well, we're both women. Like, how much harm could this? And I think a big
Right.
issue is how much harm could really happen if it's 2 people of the same sex. Like, are they really going to kill each other? Probably not. And I think that's like when I talk to other queer people who went to get restraining orders, because that's unfortunately what I ended up having to do. A lot of them said, you probably won't get it because judges look at you two and they see 2 people of the same sex of a similar size and they think, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to deny this. So I was fortunate enough to have a good network of people to talk to, but I think that's a lot of it is just people just not knowing like what could really happen and people not talking about it. So that's why I try to talk about it when I can.
Well, I'm glad you do bring awareness to it because, like I said, it is happening, and I think it's still this idea of feminine versus masculine. Like, oh, boys will be boys, they'll fight with each other, or it's the opposite. It's like two gay guys. What harm can they do? Like, they'll just have like a bitch cat fight, and then
Yeah,
it's like, oh, two girls. I mean, girls can't fight, girly girls. You know what I mean? And it's like this
yeah,
weird double standard of feminine versus masculine, but it does happen.
yeah,
And there's emotional and physical abuse, but I think maybe it's because also we tend to kind of hang out in the same circles, the
mhm,
gays and the lesbians, whatever, and so these circles are small, and it's like, when you go through a breakup, that's hard enough, but something with domestic abuse, I mean, that is so serious. I think it's people are so afraid because it's going to damage what their little circle or their bubble of friends.
yeah, definitely. I think, and that's the thing. I kind of just stayed quiet about it and just try to like gently walk away. And unfortunately, the other person kept going with it. Like, I mean, this isn't that terrifying, but the one day I opened my front door and she's just there. And I lived in a pretty gated, difficult to get into. Like, I had the keys.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would struggle to get in, and she's just standing there. And I'm like, so
Ugh.
yeah.
Now, how was your experience with law enforcement and even the judicial system? Did you experience any homophobia?
Well, I would say I was fortunate enough in the court system when I got the restraining order that it didn't, they were not homophobic. The judge was really good. He was very understanding. And even when I heard, because you're sitting there like all day listening to everybody's court case, and he
Yeah.
just seemed like he really like listened to the facts, and he seemed like he had no bias about anybody. And but as far as basically, I never, there was one physical situation where it got physically harmful and I didn't call the cops. For one thing, I was super shocked that it was happening. And I was also kind of like myself, like with a little bit of that stigma and that stereotyping of like, well, it's just a woman, like what's two women, like what's the worst that's gonna happen? And I was also deeply embarrassed. I mean, that's a lot when someone does that to you, and you're thinking, oh, we're in this good relationship together, and it's shocking and you don't want to talk about it to people. But so I didn't call the police. And so what ended up happening was the other person appealed the restraining order eventually, about after about a year. And the appeal was actually won by the other party because they were like, well, why didn't you call the cops? Like in
Uh,
the hearing, they're like, why didn't you
yeah.
call the cops? And I'm like, well, for one thing, have you seen the cops? Like, that's why I didn't call the cops. But also, like, I didn't think they would take it seriously. And there was one instance where when I had the restraining order, I heard someone kind of like pacing outside of my apartment, and it freaked me out. And I couldn't see, they were like pacing at an angle where I couldn't see who was out there, but it was in the same like heavily gated apartment building. And I got a frantic phone call over Facebook from that person's other ex, and she had actually gone, the person I had the restraining order against went to her other ex's house that night and was like banging on the door and like screaming. So I was like, I'm pretty sure that's her out there. So I called the cops, and they were just kind of like, well, can you just open the door and see? And I'm like, no, I don't want to open the
Uh,
door. That's crazy. Like,
yeah.
why? I'm calling you because I'm scared. And they were like, well, we're not going to come out for that then. Come, like, call us again if she gets in your home. And I'm like, call
And by
again?
that point, it could be too late.
Yeah. So I was like, you guys don't do much. Like, I hate to say it, but no.
Well, I'm glad that you're sharing your story because I think, the more stories like this that are shared, I think a lot of people will come forward or they'll realize that the abuse that they're going through in their relationship is serious and should be treated as serious.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, as a storyteller during quarantine, during COVID, you're used to being in front of a crowd, getting that kind of energy and feedback
Yeah.
from that entertainment side of your business. How have you been dealing with quarantine, shut up in your house with all these stories to tell?
Oh, honestly, I've been reaching out to relatives, talking to like aunts and uncles, like, oh, get a load of this. And then they're telling me their stories. And it's honestly, it's been so much fun because talking to relatives, because they have wild stories too. They really do. And like, that's something I hate to say it. I kind of hate to sound ageist, but I'm going to call myself out and say, I didn't think about the wild stories they might have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That is definitely for sure. And what do you think your stories will focus on right after quarantine? Like the very first time you're in front of an audience again, what kind of stories do you think you'll be telling?
Well, I honestly, I started writing all of my stories in like one massive Google Doc because I was thinking like maybe this would be a good time to just make a book of all my stories.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of crafting them more. So I think I would probably like some of the stories that I've told before that I never thought of with like a more socially aware spotlight on them. So I think I would do that.
I love it, and I can't wait because I do love your stories. And for our audience, you can check out some of the stories are on YouTube, by the way,
Yeah.
so you can take a little peek. Okay, are you ready to play rapid fire?
Yes.
Okay, what celebrity ghost would you want to hang out with?
Definitely Estelle Getty.
Okay, what ghost haunt is on top of your list to visit?
Oh, the Villisca Axe Murder House.
Ooh, where's that?
It's in Iowa.
Let's go.
It's so creepy. Oh, there was like an axe murderer in their attic. I don't know why I'm so fascinated by the attic
Oh my
stories.
god, yeah.
Close those attics.
Wait, so this guy lived in the attic and he just crept down and killed everybody?
He didn't live in there. They think that he just because the owner of the house was like a wealthy banker. So they think that it
Mm.
was maybe like a business person that got denied a loan from this guy, or they even think that maybe the axe murderer. Do you know the Axe Man of New Orleans, the guy who killed people if they didn't play jazz?
No.
I know.
What is going on?
Don't have axes. Nail those attics shut. That's all I have to say. But there was an axe murderer in New Orleans he wrote like long letters. He killed a few people and then he started writing letters to the newspapers saying like, if people aren't playing live jazz bands in their houses, I'm gonna creep in there and axe murder them.
Oh my
So
god.
everybody hired jazz bands and had like big parties one night to avoid getting killed. So they actually thought it was him going all the way up to Iowa. And because this guy, the murderer, ended up he would go up into the attic and he like crawled out after they had like a whole day, like a day-long church ceremony. So on Sundays, so he crawled out and killed the whole family. But the creepiest thing was he covered all of the mirrors before doing it.
Oh, it's so their souls couldn't escape
Yeah.
and come back and haunt him. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
So
What's that is creepy. What's the scariest date that you've had?
ooh. I would say it wasn't super scary, but I went on a date with my doppelganger,
Oh,
and
that is weird. That's weird.
but I wasn't even aware of it until my friends were like I would show photos like this is the person I'm going out with, like in case, whatever happens, anything weird happens, like this is who you need to look for. And my friends were like, that's just you. And I was like, wait, what? And they're like, that looks just like you. And so I wasn't creeped out until after I looked at like what doppelgangers really are and like how spooky they are.
It is. We see a lot in the gay community. It's like, oh, pretty boy dates pretty boy. It's like boring. Okay, the worst Halloween costume you ever wore. You're like, oh god, that was a bad costume.
I was, fried green tomatoes.
Yes, of course. Hello,
Yeah.
I'm gay.
I know. I was like, well, who hasn't been if you're gay? I was Kathy Bates' character when she wrapped herself in the saran wrap. But like only 2 people got it. And I went to work like that. And like nobody in the office, everybody was like, what? Is that even appropriate for work? And I'm like, yes, it's appropriate for work. It's fried green tomatoes. Kathy Bates.
Tawanda.
Yeah, I was like, Tawanda. And they're like, what are you talking about?
Oh, that makes my day. Okay, what location would we most likely see your ghost at that you would be horrified for us to find out? Like mine is Sizzler. My ghost would be around Sizzler saying, "We need more potatoes."
Yeah, probably Panera Bread. I love that
Okay.
and the bread bowl.
Yeah, that's I can see that. Okay, tell our audience where they want, where you want them to find you, follow you, listen to you, everything.
Yeah, okay. So A Touch from the Past podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you just Google it, you can pretty easily find it. We're also on Instagram, A Touch from the Past at Instagram, And then for myself, I'm on Instagram at Jen Curcio.
I love talking to you. I literally, we could share stories forever and ever. And I had the opportunity to guest on your podcast to tell my super scary story. So you guys make sure that you listen to that episode as well. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you. Have a good Halloween season.
Yeah. Boo.
Boo.
That was my impression of the gay ghost. That was Jen Curcio. And that is our episode. I'm your host and lead writer for Metrosource, Alexander Rodriguez. You can follow me on Instagram at AlexanderIsOnAir. And you can binge listen to all of our episodes featuring your favorite celebrities from our issues and online stories. And until next time, stay true and do you, boo. Yes, girl. Boo. That has been another Metrosource Mini. Like, share, and subscribe on your favorite podcast player, and check out the latest issue of Metrosource Magazine on newsstands or online at metrosource.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram at Metrosource, and on Twitter at Metrosource Mag. Until next time, stay fabulous.